Teachers, you want to empower students to do more authentic inquiry. That's not canned, but it's open-ended, driven by real-life data that's relevant to students and truly empowers them to make a difference. One of the first papers, we have a ton of time, 27 minutes I think to be exact. So we've laid it out, what we're going to talk about today, pretty minute by minute.
So I love StemHero in the work that I do, which again is specifically geared towards kids of color, kids from low-income backgrounds, is it really makes STEM education come to life in a way that I typically only see in schools that serve students from more affluent backgrounds.
First of all, StemHero is all about allowing students to do data inquiry that's authentic with real data. What we do then is we tap into the utility meters, the water, gas, electricity meters that are already in every single student's home, apartment building, and school. And we simply allow them to harvest data from that. We then have a software that allows them to see that data in a very simple, intuitive way that's not intimidating, allows them to safely view it. Don't pull that, don't pull that. Okay, how much time do we have?
A minute and
Okay. All right, come here. So I need at Marquette, I was getting my master's degree in political science and actually got caught up in all this discussion around Milwaukee being the world's water hub. And a lot of discussion about how we need more young people to head into these careers, into natural resources. A lot of time when we hear about the STEM gap, a lot of it's about coding or software development. In fact, energy and water are expecting between a 40 and 50% of their workforce to reach retirement age in the next 10 years.
So I started working with StemHero because I think it's a great company, it's a great organization. It's wonderful for students to be able to use their engineering skills from a very young age and really learn what the story behind the data is telling them. And I personally feel that it's important that girls and minority children are really introduced early on to STEM and that they're able to use those skills in the real world right away, which is what StemHero provides for the students.
So on the first is a getting started guide that we put right on the front cover. And I'll talk about some of those things. Also here on the front cover, if you open up that tab, is a look at this, the timeline of implementation. So generally, this is done over the course of 4 to 5 weeks. And again, what we're doing here, if you look at these colors, I'm now looking at this at this chart here. And by the way, again, this was another teacher that was like, you need to have some sort of visual representation of how this works. So we're like, okay. So what we're doing here is we're hooking students. We're explaining why it's important to be folks who think about their natural resource consumption. Okay, quickly.
where's Melanie?
You got a marker? Let's go this way. We gotta find the water meter is over here. This way, come on, water meter's over here. Then students are collecting data. They're collecting baseline data. Then they are designing an experiment where they are going to decide some efficiency action that they want to take. It could be technology-based, or actually in homes, 20% of potential savings, energy and water, is just due to behavior. So this is not something that requires people to replace their refrigerator or something. We had a lot of students who do the turn off the lights or turn off the water when you brush your teeth type things. And then they're going to measure the results. Again, they're collecting data on what their experiment was, comparing that with classmates, and then presenting that somehow. That's the general idea of the curriculum.
So what it does is it gives kids an opportunity to take the school context, which is often far removed and separated from the home context and the context that they operate in outside of the school, and it actually brings those two worlds together. So now kids are able to see that I can take STEM learning, I can take the stuff I'm talking about in math and science, and I can gather data from my lived experience and then analyze that to actually learn and become a scientist.
First question I get is, how are students going to be successful in participating? What about students who live in an apartment building? I know we have a teacher from Franklin, right, in the Franklin area. Sometimes in the outskirts, some students might be on a well, right? So they might not have access to all these meters, right? So there's this question of how are those students going to be able to participate in this? Okay, So first of all, I want to acknowledge that we are trying to empower students in a real, authentic way. So there is some level of kind of messiness here, and that's okay, and that's actually kind of fun. It's because students, it's amazing how many times students will go, how many of you have seen a meter like that at your house? I'm pointing to this picture back here, this electricity meter. And it's so funny how students will go, oh yeah, I've got one of those on the side of my house. And another student will go, oh yeah, on the side of my house too. And they're like, yeah, man. As adults, we're like, yeah, it's on the side of everybody's house. But for students, it's like they love that commonality. Or it's not. Well, mine's on my garage. Well, that's kind of weird. What's up with that? All right, so here's what we're going to do. This is a water meter, right? Water comes in the building here, and whenever somebody uses water, it passes through here. So when they start flushing the toilet, we're going to see this thing start to turn. All right, so on now, water meters, what you need to notice is I want you to write down the... It's stationary, right? Nothing's going on. And then all of a sudden, this little flow meter spins around really quickly, and about 4 gallons get eaten up. And the students went, whoa, what was going on? And it was like, well, what rapidly uses a bunch of water and then stops? And then there's like that lovely silence. And then a student was like, somebody flush the toilet. Oh, somebody flush it. And then we actually used cell phones to coordinate some students going to flush the toilet so we could actually monitor whether or not, it said it uses 1.5 gallons, but how much did it actually use? And we could calculate that.
So a lot of times when I'm in class or I'm teaching a class, students are like, when are we ever going to use this? When are we going to actually apply this in our lives? And StemHero is actually applicable from day one. Students can see their meters, they can see what they're using, their consumption, and then they're able to take that data back to the classroom or to their parents and say, look, we could reduce in these ways. I've learned this in school, the data's telling us this story of what we're using in consumption, and I really think it's applicable immediately. And parents can see that right away as well, and I think it's a money saver. It's conserving energy and electricity, water, and it's also something that students can feel good about and empowered by. And then using that and going forward, they know that they're decision makers in their lives from early on. And that just helps students with their confidence levels and going forward into STEM fields and careers for the future.
We will actually be providing all of you with kits of different devices. So again, it's really important to us that this isn't a program that speaks to a family navigating poverty and says, God, you're really inefficient. Why don't you just get a new washing machine? And instead what we're going to do is we actually will provide, we want students to be creative because again, so much of this industry is kind of talking down to people and saying, hey, here's 50 tips for how you should save water and energy. Why aren't you doing them? Don't you get it? And instead what we really want to do is we actually want to empower students to be like, yeah, we tried those light bulbs and they're ugly. Like my parents aren't going to do that. So instead, we're going to do the light thing, but we will provide some devices as well that what we love is that a student will identify. They'll be like, yeah, actually my shower head is really old and inefficient. So therefore, I'm now making a hypothesis that if I replace that shower head with an efficient model, I should see an 8% reduction. So now, here's your shower head, but a lot of times with other programs, they would give a student a shower head and go, awesome, go install that thing. And what we want to do is we actually want to leverage this as a chance to act like an engineer and scientist and not just go like, oh yeah, the book says it should reduce my usage by 8%. Why don't you actually collect data and measure it? And then come back with some really interesting conclusions about whether it did or it didn't. Or maybe we put it in and then my dad really doesn't like the lack of pressure, so we took it down. So if we were to design this better, we need to figure out a way to add more pressure to it. That's the really cool stuff that we're trying to get students to think about.
So for me, StemHero is really, really powerful when teachers go, okay, here's my scope and sequence for science. I want a resource that, one, is easy to use, and two, reinforces a lot of what I'm teaching in a really powerful way. So again, if I'm a math teacher and I'm looking at interpreting graphs, graphing, collecting data, analyzing data, all those pieces, what I'm able to do with StemHero is pull up that curriculum, pull up the lessons, pull up the app and all of the things that come with that, and I'm able to use that as a constant reference point throughout the semester. So I may use StemHero to teach multiple standards, multiple objectives, because again, it's a really rich backdrop to to do a lot of these things in a way that's real for kids. So it might not be like I'm just pulling it out for this specific lesson, but it's going to be like a theme and a tool that we revisit over the course of a quarter, a semester, even an entire year.